The sky over downtown Chicago hadn't seen proper sunlight in 47 days, and Marcus Johnson wasn't counting on seeing it anytime soon. The thick, ash-gray clouds that rolled in on what everyone now called the last Tuesday hadn't budged an inch, hanging over the city like some kind of cosmic blanket that decided humanity's bedtime was permanent. Marcus gripped his modified baseball bat tighter as he peered through the cracked window of the abandoned sporting goods store, watching the street below where shadows moved with that telltale jerky, unnatural gait that made his stomach turn every single time. Man, he'd seen some messed up stuff in his 28 years, growing up on the South Side and all, but nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the world going straight to hell in less than a week. The first reports came through on a Monday night, and like most folks, Marcus figured it was some kind of hoax, maybe one of those viral marketing campaigns for a new horror flick. Some talking head on the news blabbing about people in New York getting sick, biting each other, acting all crazy. He'd been at O'Malley's bar with his buddy Travis, shooting pool and minding his own business, when the bartender cranked up the volume. They'd laughed it off, made jokes about bath salts in Florida, you know, the usual stuff. But by Tuesday morning, when his sister Keisha called him crying, saying their mom wasn't answering her phone and the neighbors were screaming, that's when the cold reality smacked him right in the face. The dead weren't staying dead, and they were hungry as hell. Marcus glanced back at the makeshift camp they'd set up in the store's back office, where 5 other survivors sat in various states of exhaustion and fear. There was Jennifer Jenny Martinez, a former EMT who'd saved his ass at least 3 times already with her medical knowledge in steady hands. The woman was tough as nails, probably mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a perpetual ponytail and eyes that had seen way too much death even before the world ended. She was currently checking the bandage on old Tommy Wheeler's arm, the 60-something retired postal worker who'd gotten scratched by a loose piece of metal while they were scavenging last week. Everyone kept watching Tommy real careful-like, knowing that one wrong kind of scratch meant putting a bullet in someone's brain, but so far he seemed okay, just tired and scared like the rest of them. Sitting against the far wall was Rebecca Bex Thompson, a 19-year-old college kid who'd been studying engineering at Northwestern when everything went sideways. Smart as a whip, that girl, always figuring out how to rig up alarms or reinforce doors with whatever junk they found lying around. She wore her blonde hair chopped short now, easier to manage, harder for those things to grab, and kept her daddy's hunting knife strapped to her thigh at all times. Next to her sat the brothers, Dylan and Connor O'Brien, both in their early 20s, both built like they'd spent their whole lives throwing hay bales or working construction. Turns out they'd actually been personal trainers at some fancy gym downtown, but their muscles served a better purpose now, hauling supplies and bashing skulls when things got too close for comfort. The 6th member of their ragtag crew was 12-year-old Austin Davies, a skinny kid with messy brown hair and glasses held together with duct tape. They'd found him hiding in a restaurant freezer about 3 weeks back, nearly frozen to death but still breathing. The kid didn't talk much about what happened to his folks, and nobody pushed him on it. Some stories didn't need telling. Austin had this beat-up backpack he never let go of, filled with comic books and a handheld gaming device that ran out of battery 2 weeks ago, but he carried it anyway, like holding onto those little pieces of the old world might somehow bring it back. "Yo, Marcus, we got movement out there?" Dylan called softly from across the room, his voice carrying that edge everyone's voice had these days, the edge that said they were all wound tighter than a spring, ready to snap or bolt at any second. Marcus shook his head, still watching the street. "Nah, man, just the usual shufflers. Maybe 5 or 6, nothing we can't handle if we gotta dip out." He hated how casual he sounded talking about those things, like they were just another inconvenience instead of reanimated corpses of people who used to have lives, families, dreams. That dude down there in the shredded business suit? Probably had a wife, kids waiting for him to come home. That woman dragging her broken leg behind her, still wearing scrubs? Could have been a nurse, a doctor, someone who spent their whole life saving people. Now they were just walking nightmares, and the only way to stop them was a solid hit to the brain. Jenny finished with Tommy's bandage and walked over to Marcus, her footsteps nearly silent. She'd learned to move quiet, they all had. Noise meant attention, and attention meant death. "We're running low on clean water," she said, keeping her voice barely above a whisper. "Got maybe 2 days left if we're careful. Food's not much better. We need to make a move soon, hit up one of the supply points we scouted." Marcus rubbed his face, feeling the scruff of his beard. When was the last time he'd properly shaved? When was the last time any of that normal stuff mattered? "Yeah, I know. Been thinking about that grocery distribution center off Western Avenue. Big place, probably picked over by now, but there might be something in the back warehouses. Question is whether we all go or leave someone here to hold down the fort." "We don't split up," Connor said firmly, standing up and rolling his shoulders. The dude was always ready to move, always antsy. Every horror movie ever made teaches you that. We split up, we die. Simple math. His brother Dylan nodded in agreement. Connor's right. We move as a unit or we don't move at all. This place ain't much, but we can always find another hidey hole if we gotta abandon it. Can't replace people, though. Tommy cleared his throat, his voice raspy with age and exhaustion. You young folks should go. I'll stay here with the boy. Slow you down anyway with this bum leg of mine. The old man tried to smile, but it came out more like a grimace. Everyone knew Tommy was struggling, not just with the injury but with the whole situation. Man had lived through Vietnam, raised 3 kids, buried a wife, and thought he'd seen it all. Turns out the universe had one more curveball to throw at him. Not happening, old-timer, Marcus said, injecting a warmth into his voice he didn't quite feel. You think we're gonna leave you in Austin here alone? Those things figure out how to get in, you'd be toast. Nah, man, we move together. Bex, how long would it take you to rig up something on the doors here, make it look like the place is still secure but actually be ready for a quick exit? Bex looked up from the water bottle she'd been rationing, her eyes calculating. Give me 20 minutes, maybe 30. I can set up some noise traps on the main approaches, make it sound like there's more of us than there is. And I'll rig the back exit so we can pop it open from outside if we need to circle back. Smart thinking. The plan started coming together the way plans did now, quick, dirty, and with about a million ways it could go completely sideways. They'd leave at first light, or what passed for first light under the perpetual gloom. The distribution center was about 4 miles east, which meant at least 2 hours of careful movement through city streets that had become a maze of abandoned cars, barricades, and roaming packs of the undead. Marcus had learned early on that zombies, God, he hated that word, sounded too much like a movie, too fake, but what else were you gonna call them, tended to cluster in certain areas. Anywhere that had drawn crowds before, train stations, shopping districts, that kind of thing. The memories of life seemed to pull them in, even though there was nothing left inside those rotting skulls but hunger. As the group prepped their gear, checking weapons and packing light, Marcus found himself watching Austin. The kid was methodically loading a backpack with supplies, his small hands working with a precision that seemed wrong for someone so young. No 12-year-old should have to know the difference between a good supply run pack and a bad one. No kid should have to check the edge on a knife or know which canned foods lasted longest. But here they were, living in a world that didn't give a damn about should or shouldn't. Hey, little man, Marcus said, crouching down next to Austin. You doing okay? Austin nodded without looking up, his jaw set in that stubborn way that meant he was definitely not okay but wasn't about to admit it. I'm fine. Just making sure I don't forget anything important. You scared? Marcus asked, because sometimes naming the thing made it smaller. Yeah, Austin said quietly. Yeah, I'm really scared. Good, Marcus replied, and that made Austin look up, confusion crossing his young face. Being scared keeps you sharp, keeps you careful. It's the folks who stop being scared that mess up and get dead. You feel that fear, you use it, understand? Austin nodded slowly, and something like determination flickered in his eyes. I understand. I'm gonna help. I'm not just gonna be dead weight. Never thought you were, kid. Never thought you were. The night passed slower than molasses, the way nights did when you were watching every shadow and jumping at every sound. They took turns on watch, 2 hours each, while the others tried to grab whatever sleep their wired brains would allow. Marcus took the last shift before dawn, sitting by the window and watching the street gradually shift from pitch black to murky gray. The zombies seemed less active at night, or maybe they just blended better with the darkness. Either way, he counted at least 15 of them out there now, wandering aimlessly, bumping into cars and each other like some sick parody of a morning commute. When the appointed hour came, they moved out in formation, Marcus and Connor on point, Jenny and Dylan in the middle with Tommy and Austin, and Bex bringing up the rear with a wickedly sharp machete she'd liberated from a hardware store. They slipped out the back exit into an alley that smelled like rotten old garbage, the stench so thick you could practically taste it. Marcus tried to breathe through his mouth, but that somehow made it worse. The city felt wrong in the daylight, or what passed for daylight under the clouds. Chicago had always been loud, always moving, always alive with car horns and construction noise and a million people living their lives. Now it was silent except for the shuffle of dead feet and the occasional crash as something collapsed or fell over. Buildings stood like tombstones, their windows dark and empty. Papers blew down the street like tumbleweeds. A bus sat sideways across Michigan Avenue, its doors hanging open, dark stains on the seats inside that nobody wanted to look at too close. They moved in silence, communicating with hand signals that Jenny had taught them, military stuff she'd picked up from her brother who'd served overseas. Stop. Go. Danger left. Danger right. The zombies responded to sound and movement more than sight, so staying quiet and smooth meant staying alive. Marcus watched a pack of them half a block down, maybe 8 or 9 clustered around something on the ground they were tearing into. He didn't look too close at what that something had been. Didn't matter anymore. Connor tapped his shoulder and pointed down a side street that looked clearer. They adjusted course, moving single file between abandoned cars. A minivan with car seats still strapped in the back. An expensive sports car with its driver's door hanging open, keys still in the ignition. A taxi with spiderweb cracks across the windshield. Each vehicle told a story, and each story ended the same way, badly. They were about 2 miles in when things went sideways. It started with a sound, a crash from inside a building to their right, followed by shouting. Human shouting. Marcus held up his fist and everyone froze, pressing against the nearest cover. The shouting got louder, and then a door burst open and 3 people came running out, 2 men and a woman, all of them looking rough, clothes torn and faces dirty. Behind them poured a flood of zombies, at least 20 of the bastards, moving faster than usual with the excitement of a chase. Run! Go, 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 one of the men was screaming, and the 3 of them were booking it down the street, heading straight toward Marcus's group. Ah, hell, Connor muttered, and that about summed it up. Marcus had maybe 3 seconds to make a call. They could hide, let these strangers run past and hopefully draw the zombie horde with them. Safer for his group, but it meant watching 3 people die. Or they could help, try to save them, but that meant engaging with 20+ zombies and making a ton of noise that would probably draw even more. The old Marcus, the before the world ended Marcus, wouldn't have hesitated. But that Marcus had lived in a world with safety nets and consequences and some kind of future. This Marcus had to think about 6 people who were counting on him. Jenny caught his eye and gave him a small nod. She'd follow whatever call he made. Bex looked determined. The O'Brien brothers were already shifting their weight, getting ready to fight. Tommy had his revolver out, old hands surprisingly steady. And little Austin, had pulled out a crowbar from his pack and held it like he knew how to use it. "We help," Marcus said, making the call. "But we do it smart. Bex, Connor, with me. We draw them off to the left, make noise, lead them away. Jenny, Dylan, Tommy, you get those people to cover and then circle back to support. Austin, you stick with Jenny like glue, you hear me?" "Got it," Austin said, his voice only shaking a little. And then there was no more time for planning because the three strangers were right on top of them and the zombie horde was maybe 20 feet behind. "This way!" Marcus shouted, waving the strangers toward Dylan and Jenny. The three of them veered that direction without question, too scared and exhausted to do anything but follow orders. Marcus turned toward the approaching swarm and started banging his bat against a car hood, the metallic clang ringing out like a dinner bell. "Yo! Over here, you ugly sons of..." The zombies' heads swiveled toward the noise with disturbing synchronization, milky eyes fixing on him, mouths opening in silent hunger. "Yeah, that's right, come get some." Beck started whooping and hollering beside him, making as much racket as possible, while Connor grabbed a loose brick and hurled it through a store window. The crash of breaking glass sealed the deal. The entire horde shifted direction, flowing toward them like a tide of rotting flesh. "Move!" Marcus barked, and the three of them took off down the left fork of the street, not running full out, that would tire them too quick, but moving at a fast jog that kept them ahead of the shambling mass behind them. The zombies gave chase with that relentless, mindless determination that made them so damn terrifying. They didn't get tired. Didn't give up. Didn't stop unless you stopped them permanently. Connor pointed at a parking garage ahead, and Marcus nodded. They could lose the horde in there, use the multiple levels and tight spaces to their advantage. They ducked inside, and the temperature immediately dropped about 10 degrees. The garage was dark as pitch past the entrance, and Marcus pulled out his flashlight, flicking it on for just a second to get his bearings before shutting it off. Light attracted attention just as much as sound. Behind them, the zombies poured into the garage entrance, funneling through the narrow opening. "Stairs," Bex whispered urgently, and they found a stairwell door, yanking it open and slipping inside. The stairwell echoed with their footsteps as they climbed, going up 3 levels before emerging back into the garage proper. They could hear the zombies below, confused, spreading out, searching. "We wait them out," Marcus breathed. "Let them disperse, then we slip back down and out." They crouched behind a concrete pillar, weapons ready, controlling their breathing. Minutes crawled by like hours. Marcus's legs started to cramp. Sweat ran down his back despite the cold. A zombie wandered past their position, close enough that Marcus could smell the rot, could hear the wet rasp of its breathing. His fingers tightened on the bat. The zombie paused, and Marcus's heart hammered so loud he was sure the thing could hear it. But then it moved on, dragging its feet toward some other sound or smell. After what felt like an eternity, the garage grew quieter. The horde was spreading out, losing focus. "Now," Marcus whispered, and they moved like ghosts toward the stairwell, descending carefully, pausing at each level to listen. On the ground floor, they could see the exit, and beyond it, the street looked clear. They slipped out, blinking in the gray light, and started making their way back toward where they'd left the others. Marcus's chest was tight with worry. Had Jenny gotten those people to safety? Was everyone okay? Had the plan worked, or had he just gotten his people killed trying to play hero? The streets seemed even more menacing now, every shadow potentially hiding danger. They moved quickly but carefully, retracing their route. Relief flooded through him when he spotted Dylan's distinctive red jacket ducked behind an overturned food truck. Marcus whistled softly, a specific pattern they'd agreed on, and Dylan's head popped up. He whistled back, and then Marcus and his crew were jogging over, everyone doing quick head counts and checking for injuries. "Everyone good?" Jenny asked, her professional EMT voice in full effect. "Yeah, we're solid," Marcus replied. You? All accounted for. She gestured toward the 3 strangers, who were sitting on the ground looking shell-shocked. Found these folks? They're not bit, I checked. Just shaken up. Marcus approached the strangers, getting his first good look at them. The woman was maybe 40, with short red hair and an athletic build. One of the men was young, probably early 20s, black like Marcus, with a nasty cut across his forehead that had stopped bleeding but needed cleaning. The other man was Hispanic, stocky and strong-looking, with tattoos running down both arms and a 1,000-yard stare that Marcus recognized from looking in mirrors. I'm Marcus, he said simply. You folks got names? The woman spoke first, her voice hoarse. Rachel. Rachel Summers. This is Ethan, she nodded at the young black man, and Luis. We've been holed up in that office building for 3 weeks. Supplies ran out. We tried to make a run for it, but the lower floors were full of those things. They heard us coming. You got bit? Marcus asked bluntly, because there was no room for politeness when it came to that particular question. No, Rachel said firmly. Scratched up, bruised, scared out of our minds, but not bit. Luis finally spoke, his voice a low rumble. You didn't have to help us. Why'd you do it? Marcus shrugged. Because we're not them yet. Because if we stop helping each other, we might as well just lie down and die. Because it was the right thing to do. He paused. Though I'll be real with you, we can't take on more people permanently. We're barely making it as is. But we're heading to a distribution center to scavenge supplies. You're welcome to tag along, grab what you need, and then we part ways. Fair? Rachel and her companions exchanged looks, having some kind of silent conversation. Then Rachel nodded. Fair. And thank you. Seriously. We thought we were dead. Day ain't over yet, Connor said with dark humor. Still plenty of time for everything to go to hell. He wasn't wrong. The group, now expanded to 9, continued toward the distribution center with heightened caution. More people meant more noise, more chances for someone to mess up. But it also meant more eyes watching for danger, more hands to carry supplies. Marcus tried to see it as a net positive. The distribution center loomed ahead after another 40 minutes of tense navigation, a massive warehouse complex surrounded by a chain-link fence that was mostly intact. The front gates hung open, which could mean someone had already raided the place or could mean nothing at all. Hard to tell. The parking lot was full of delivery trucks sitting idle, their contents unknown. We go in careful, Marcus said, addressing the whole group. Standard formation. Watch each other's backs. We grab what we can carry, water and medicine first, then food, then anything else useful. In and out in 30 minutes, no longer. Everyone clear? Heads nodded all around. Even the 3 newcomers seemed to understand the stakes. They approached the main entrance, a set of double doors that stood partially ajar. Marcus tested the door, pushing it open slowly, wincing at the creak of hinges. Beyond was darkness and silence. Flashlights on my mark, Jenny whispered. 3, 2, 1, mark. Beams of light cut through the gloom, revealing a massive open space filled with industrial shelving units stretching up 3 stories high. Pallets of goods sat everywhere, and, thank God, most of them looked untouched. The place had been locked down tight before everyone inside either died or fled, which meant the supplies were preserved. Jackpot, Bex breathed. They spread out in pairs, staying within sight of each other. Marcus and Austin headed for a section marked beverages, finding pallets of bottled water still wrapped in plastic. Grab as many as you can carry, Marcus told Austin, loading bottles into his pack. Austin did the same, his skinny arms straining with the weight but not complaining. Dylan and Connor were hitting the medical supplies, loading up on first aid kits, antibiotics, pain meds. Jenny and Rachel were in the food section, grabbing canned goods and dried stuff that wouldn't spoil. Ethan and Luis were finding tools and gear, rope, batteries, duct tape, all the random stuff that became priceless when civilization collapsed. Tommy stood guard near the entrance, his revolver drawn, eyes scanning for threats. For about 15 minutes, it felt almost too easy. They were loading up, working efficiently, and nobody had seen or heard a single zombie. Marcus should have known better. Easy didn't exist anymore. The first sign of trouble was a crash from somewhere deep in the warehouse, followed by a low moan that echoed through the space. Everyone froze. Then came another moan, and suddenly it was like the building itself was groaning. Flashlight beams swung wildly, searching for the source. There! Bex pointed toward the back of the warehouse where a section of shelving had collapsed, and from the wreckage, figures were emerging. Zombies, lots of them, maybe trapped back there when the place locked down. And now they were awake and aware that fresh meat had just walked into their house. Time to go, people! Marcus shouted. Grab what you got and move. The group converged on the exit, but zombies were emerging from everywhere now, from offices, from bathroom areas, from behind shelving units. The whole warehouse had been a tomb, and they'd just woken the dead. A zombie in a warehouse uniform lurched toward Austin, and Marcus swung his bat with all his strength, connecting with the thing's skull with a wet crunch. It dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Go, 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 he yelled at Austin, pushing the kid toward the door. More zombies were closing in from the sides. Connor grabbed a pallet jack and shoved it into a group of them, knocking them over like bowling pins. Jenny had her knife out, driving it into the eye socket of a zombie that got too close. Rachel was swinging a length of pipe she'd found, holding off 2 more. They fought their way toward the exit in a chaotic scramble of violence and terror. Luis went down, a zombie grabbing his ankle, but Ethan was there in a flash, stomping on the dead thing's arm until it let go and hauling Luis back to his feet. Bex was screaming something that might have been a battle cry or might have been just raw fear, her machete arcing through the air. Then they were through the doors, spilling out into the parking lot, running for the fence line. Behind them, what looked like 50 or more zombies poured out of the warehouse, giving chase with that horrible single-minded hunger. The group didn't stop running until they'd put 3 blocks between themselves and the distribution center, finally ducking into an underground subway entrance and barricading the top of the stairs with debris. Everyone collapsed, gasping for air, checking themselves and each other for bites or scratches. Miraculously, everyone was clean. Bruised, terrified, exhausted, but not infected. Everyone still got their supplies? Jenny asked, ever practical. Amazingly, most of them had held onto their packs. They'd gotten water, medicine, food, and gear. The run had been a success, even if it had nearly gotten them killed. That was pretty much the standard these days. Success and near-death were basically the same thing. They rested in the subway station for about an hour, eating small amounts of food and drinking water, letting their heart rates return to something approaching normal. Austin sat next to Marcus, looking small and young and traumatized. You did good back there, little man, Marcus said quietly. Kept your head, didn't panic. I'm proud of you. I was terrified, Austin admitted. Yeah, me too. But we did it anyway. That's all that matters. Rachel approached Marcus, her expression serious. Look, I know you said we'd part ways after the supply run, but can we stick with you guys? At least for a while? I know it's asking a lot, but we work hard, we pull our weight, and honestly, I think you could use the extra hands. Strength in numbers, right? Marcus looked at her for a long moment, then glanced around at his crew. Jenny gave him a small nod. The O'Brien brothers shrugged like they didn't care either way. Bex looked cautiously optimistic. Tommy was already half asleep, and Austin was watching with wide, hopeful eyes. All right, Marcus said finally. But this is a democracy, more or less. Everyone contributes, everyone gets a say, and if someone gets bit, we handle it quick and clean. No exceptions, not even for me. We clear? Crystal clear, Rachel said, and Luis and Ethan nodded their agreement. And just like that, their little family of survivors grew by 3. Marcus tried not to think about how many more people they might lose, how many more impossible decisions lay ahead. He tried to focus on the fact that they'd survived another day, secured supplies, and maybe, just maybe, increased their odds of making it through this nightmare. The group eventually moved out from the subway, heading back toward their temporary base. The streets seemed even more crowded with zombies now, like the noise from the warehouse had drawn them from all over. They had to take a longer route, moving carefully through alleys and side streets, occasionally doubling back when they encountered too many undead to safely pass. Night was falling by the time they made it back to the sporting goods store, and everyone was dead on their feet. Bex rigged up her traps and alarms while the others distributed the supplies they gathered. It felt good to see their stockpile increase, to know they had water for more than just a couple of days, to have medicine in case someone got hurt. As the others settled in for the night, Marcus took first watch again, positioning himself by the window and looking out at the dark street. The zombies were out there, shadows moving among shadows. Somewhere in the city, other survivors were probably hiding just like they were, hoping to see another dawn. And somewhere beyond the city, maybe the military was regrouping, maybe scientists were working on a cure, maybe there was hope. But probably not. Probably this was it, the end of the world, the final chapter of humanity's story. Cities full of the dead, the living reduced to scavengers and refugees in their own home. No more internet, no more electricity, no more civilization. Just survival, day by day, hour by hour, fighting for every breath. Marcus thought about his mom, hoping she'd gone quick, hoping she hadn't suffered. He thought about Keisha, his sister, and wondered if she'd made it out of her neighborhood or if she was one of the shambling corpses out there in the dark. He thought about all the people he'd known, all the lives that had been snuffed out in a matter of days. But then he looked back at the people sleeping in the room behind him, Jenny with her medical kit still clutched in one hand even in sleep, the O'Brien brothers back to back like they were still kids sharing a room, Bex curled up with her machete beside her, Tommy snoring softly with his revolver on his chest, Austin wrapped in a blanket that was too thin but was all they had, and the 3 newcomers trying to find comfort on the hard floor. These people were alive because they'd helped each other, because they'd made the hard choices, because they refused to give up. Maybe that was enough. Maybe survival was its own kind of victory. Maybe the fact that humans could still care about each other, could still risk their lives for strangers, meant that the dead hadn't really won. They'd taken the world, sure, but they hadn't taken humanity's humanity. Not yet. Not as long as people like Marcus and his crew kept fighting. The night stretched on, cold and dark and full of danger. Somewhere in the distance, Marcus heard gunfire, short bursts that meant someone else was fighting for their life. Then silence. He didn't know if that silence meant victory or death, and he tried not to think about it too hard. When morning came, another gray, sunless morning under those eternal clouds, they'd have to make more decisions. Find a more permanent shelter, maybe. Try to locate other survivor groups. Figure out some kind of long-term plan beyond just don't die today. But that was future Marcus's problem. Present Marcus just needed to keep watch, keep his people safe for one more night, and trust that when the sun rose, or tried to, anyway, they'd figure out the next step. Because that's what survivors did. They adapted. They endured. They found reasons to keep going even when every rational thought said to give up. Marcus's reason was sitting right behind him, 8 other people who were counting on him to keep his head in the game and his bat ready for whatever came next. The dead owned the world now. But the living? The living were just getting started. And Marcus Johnson, former South Side nobody who'd never imagined himself as anyone's leader or savior, was determined to make sure that when someone eventually wrote the final chapter of humanity's story, it wouldn't end with a whimper. It would end with one hell of a fight. A zombie stumbled past the window below, its face pressed against the glass for a moment, cloudy eyes seeing nothing, searching for something it would never find. Marcus watched it without emotion, without fear. Just another obstacle, just another problem to solve. The bat felt good in his hands, solid, reliable, real. Yeah, they'd survive this. One day at a time, one fight at a time, one small victory at a time. The night had fallen forever, sure, but humans had spent thousands of years pushing back against the dark. This was just one more battle in that eternal war, and Marcus and his crew were soldiers whether they'd chosen to be or not. The journey wasn't over. Hell, it had barely begun. But they were in it together, and that counted for something. That counted for everything. Outside, the dead wandered. Inside, the living dreamed. And somewhere in between, hope refused to die.